Hello, I'm Reverend Jason Carson Wilson. Welcome to Politically Pastoral Conversations. These one-hour Zoom chats will explore the intersections of faith, politics, and society with a flair through conversations with people from all walks of life. Be sure to look out for our sibling production, the Politically Pastoral Podcast. Our inaugural conversation features Illinois LGBTQ activist and publisher, Buff Carmichael. Carmichael shares snapshots of his life, including growing up in Texas, as well as finding love and creating change in Illinois. Thanks for joining us on this transformational journey. Now let's meet Buff.
My parents had a baby girl that died at birth, and then they had 3 baby girls after that. And then I was born. My sisters were 7, 14, and 16 when I was born. So my family was much older than most parents. And by the time I was 4, 2 of my sisters had left home. So I was really sort of raised as an only child. I mean, my father was 53 years old when I was born. My mother was 38, and my youngest sister got married when I was 11. My father died when I was 11. And so from 11 on, it was my mother and me. And we put on airs of being well off when we weren't. We never were told we were poor, but in looking back, we certainly were. My father had built his dream house, and he didn't have the money to keep it up. And he had sold off the property around it for GI tract homes after World War II, and those quickly became slum. And so we had the mansion on the hill in the middle of the slum district, but it was, we were better than our neighbors. We didn't associate with people low life like us. And I was raised in a very prejudiced, racist, elitist way. And people I went to school with thought I was arrogant, and I treated others like I was better than them, I think. I grew up really associating with the kids across town who lived in better neighborhoods than I lived in, and my mother did her best to keep me able financially to go in those circles, and that's sort of my early life.
So where were you born and raised?
Waco, Texas.
So how do you think that that upbringing affected you?
Oh, my goodness, it's affected me. My parents wouldn't let me play with the kid down the street because his parents were divorced. We didn't associate with divorced people. My parents wouldn't let me play with the little kid behind me because his family was Catholics, and we didn't associate with Catholics. And the things I was taught, and being the good little boy I was, I absorbed it all. I took it all in. And it was only after I left home and went off to school that I started associating with people that were different than me and found out they were people. And I think a rebellious nature came out of that when I found out that a person's marital status or their religion or their race or whatever was not inherent to their goodness that I started changing, and various things. I was raised with a philosophy of peaceful subservience. Don't rock the boat. If things aren't the way you like them, hang on and just follow your leaders. And I broke from that and found out that I could rock the boat, and I liked rocking the boat. So I did in the first 30 years of my life, I went from one extreme to another as far as political positions and positions on social status and racism and things like that.
So as far as rocking the boat as a child, when did you start that, and how did you start that?
Well, one of the stories I told in the Windy City Times, every church in my neighborhood had a vacation Bible school, and that was a chance for my mother to get me out of the house. I was, I think I was 5 years old when I questioned the 10 Commandments was being taught at a Methodist church, and they came to "Thou shalt not kill," and we had been discussing a death penalty that was being conducted in Texas at that time, and I said, "Well, what about this?" And they says, "Well, that's all right to kill them; they're bad people." And well, that's not what the Bible says. The Bible says, "Thou shalt not kill," and so I maintain that I've been opposed to the death penalty since I was 5, and in a state where 85% of all people approve of the death penalty. So I think I rocked the boat when I was in mortuary college. I was in charge of selling ads to people for the yearbook, to people who had bought ads previously, and I was calling on the advertisers in the previous yearbook. And the coffee shop where we all went on our breaks had always run a quarter-page ad. And I went and asked the manager, a new manager, and if he was ready to renew his ad. And he said that he felt like he pretty much had the business from the mortuary college, and he didn't think there was a risk of losing it, and he didn't want an ad. And so I went back and put a note on the bulletin board that Brink's Coffee Shop has decided that our business is sewed up and they don't need an ad in our yearbook, and I think we should show them otherwise. And a few days later, he came to the college to see if it was too late to buy an ad, and he bought a full-page ad. So I found out that sometimes I can do something that make a dent in, and I can rock the boat sometimes, and sometimes there's a good reason to.
So what led to from growing up to then to mortuary school?
As a teenager, I got fascinated with cremation, and I asked my minister what my church's philosophy was on it. They don't have one. And I talked to a funeral director about it, and he filled me in a lot of brochures and pamphlets, and started talking to me about funeral service in general and why he was in funeral service. And I found it fascinating, and I talked to my minister about feeling that I was being called to something and I didn't know what. And his first assumption, "Oh, you're going to be a minister then?" No, I have never, ever felt like I was a minister. I felt I was being called to something, and it wasn't ministry. And as I looked more and more at funeral service, I saw it as a form of ministry, and I pursued it. And even though I was only in the service field for 12 years, but I maintained my license for quite a few years after that, and I think every day I'm applying lessons I learned in that 12 years. I mean, it was a preparation. I think the Holy Spirit's preparation for me to be in other things later on in life that I would apply those lessons. So I don't regret my time in funeral service at all. I loved funeral service.
So what lessons did you learn?
I went to a seminar in Chicago and met a funeral director who owned 9 funeral homes and retirement communities in Florida. And he didn't direct funerals. He didn't embalm bodies. He drove from location to location to make sure his employees were working. And he had a business card that he hid in places around the various buildings and in the cars and everything, so that the employees would find the cards when they were not expecting to. And the card said, "We may have 5 funerals today, but this family is only having 1." And if every waitress in every restaurant would learn that she may be serving 100 tables today, but I'm only going to be in there once, and she's only got one opportunity to serve me. You can apply that lesson to any career you go into. That the person you're with right now is the one that's important.
And how did those lessons and that experience, of course, in reading about you and obviously your involvement in the AIDS crisis and particularly in your effort to lift up your friend, I believe it was Steve, I believe his name was.
You mean my partner, Jerry?
Well, there was a story I recall initially when there was a gentleman, I think it was Steve Morrell.
Oh, Steve Morrell, yeah, right.
He said he'd been given 3 lines or a paragraph, and you felt like he needed more,
right,
more
right,
attention, etc., because of
right.
everything he had done as an activist. And so, I guess as you got more involved in the AIDS crisis, what did those lessons? How did those lessons help you as you went through?
That people are important. I remember every now and then when we were serving any old family in funeral home, they would want a televised obituary on the evening news. And I'd call the TV station and try to give them an obituary. And they would say, "Oh, we only carry important obituary notices for important people." I don't think I've ever met a person who wasn't important. And I got to where I would say, well, he was a very important member of his community, or he was a very important part of his family. And sometimes I would succeed, most times I would fail. But my point was that this family wants that on the TV station when they see the news tonight, and I don't see a reason why they shouldn't have it. But most time the TV station didn't agree with that.
And so that kind of brings us to the inception of the Prairie Flame, and I guess really speak to what I know at this time it was kind of you and Jerry's idea.
It
And
was
so,
actually.
so
It was
what
actually.
inspired that?
Well, Jerry was actually sort of an unwilling participant. He sort of got trapped in it. We had been working with the Illinois Gay and Lesbian Task Force, which was sort of an early forerunner to equality, what's now Equality Illinois, and we were trying to have local meetings and events and activities, political forums, anything we could come up with to keep people involved and active. And we'd stop by the bar on our way home at night, dead tired after going to an activity where 6 people showed up, and we'd sit there at the bar and hear people talk about there's nothing to do in Springfield. And we knew that we had just been somewhere where we'd been busy doing something, and there was plenty to do in Springfield. So how do you get the word to those people that there is something to do? And I tried various people who were well qualified to start a newspaper, but they were also educated enough. They knew how much work was involved, and they said, "Oh no, no way." And finally, well, we did. Patrick Bykowska started a TV program on the little public access channel that ran once a month, and at a weird hour that was, you nearly had to set your recorder to record it and play it later, and it did some good, but not a lot. And we needed something that you could put in people's hands and they could hold, and so finally, with Steve Morell's death, and with Barnes and Noble putting a display in their show window for Pride Month, and seeing letters to the editor in the mainline press condemning Barnes and Noble for doing that, I said, this is the time we've got to do it. We've just got to get something in print. And so we threw together, after Steve died in May and the display in June, we came out with an August issue in late July. And that was where Prairie Flame was born. Steve Morell may not have been important to the news editorial desk, but he had been a hard worker and a diligent activist in the AIDS community. And when I first met him, he looked like he was on death's doorstep. And then the cocktails came out, and he was just thriving. He was just doing extremely well. And he went to help his father move, and had a heart attack and died just quite suddenly. And he got as much obituary as anybody else gets, but from my perspective, he was much too important to get that.
So what does it mean to you to know that to realize the impact that the Prairie Flame had?
You know, there's a lot of times I beat myself up because it didn't have enough impact. I mentioned the people sitting on the bar stools. They're sitting on those same bar stools today. I went to so many events where people, how do you hear what's going on? I just take a Prairie Flame and lay it in their lap. So that's how you find out. And I ran across people that had been in the community that never picked up a paper. So a lot of it was futility, but I look back and think, well, we did accomplish some good things, and we put the word out on events that were coming up. And one of the complaints I heard about Prairie Flame was we never ran enough pictures. And I said, well, it's hard to get a picture of something that hasn't happened. And I tried always to publicize events before the event rather than spending space telling people what did happen, what they missed. And so we didn't run very many pictures. There wasn't much to run pictures of.
So what would it mean to you to know that while you feel like it wasn't successful because you didn't get people off bar stools, but there was at least one gay boy in downstate Illinois who saw the Prairie Flame as
Right.
a symbol of affirmation that there are other people that are like he was, which is, and I, to be frank, I'm talking about myself. I mean, for
Okay.
me, that was I remember going to Chicago on trips, and I would see Windy City Times, and so that for me was like a thing. But then,
Right.
but to finally get to back in my neck of the woods when I'd come back home, to see it there, it was like
Yeah.
like there's other people like me, or I can learn about other people like me.
I've got a fictitious friend. I don't know who he is or where he is, but I've referred to the boy that sacks groceries at the IGA in Litchfield. And the impact, because of Prairie Flame, he was able to avoid suicide. And because of Prairie Flame, he was able to protect himself from AIDS. And he was able to come to terms with his sexuality and present himself as a productive member of society. And yes, I did pat myself on the back for that sack boy at the IGA in Litchfield. And whether there is an IGA in Litchfield, I don't know. But it just sort of, that's the persona I told a lot of people during that era about what we were doing, and I felt it was important to do that. So.
Well, I only shopped at a Muhammad and in an IGA in Muhammad, so I can
Okay.
tell you about that. So just to let you know that it was important to my development as a gay man. So thank you.
I appreciate that very, very much. That gives me a lot of validity. I appreciate that.
And also even to the point that I ventured on to be a journalist too. I mean,
right, yeah.
So,
yeah.
So in multiple ways, it was a
right.
interest. But so having said that, I think one of the other things that obviously is the most important part of your life is the journey that you went on with Jerry. And so kind of, how did that start?
Well, when I lived in Dallas, I was a member of MCC, or Metropolitan Community Church, and I moved to Decatur, and there was not one, and I didn't have a car, and I was able to borrow a car one weekend, and decided to come over to Springfield to attend the MCC worship service, which they met on Sunday nights in those days. And so a couple I met at MCC told me they always went to the bar after church and for line dancing. And so I went along with them for line dancing, and Jerry was sitting there having a beer, and I sort of caught him looking me over, and so I went over and bought him a beer, and that was the end of the road for me as far as finding a partner and find somebody that I could cherish and could put up with me.
And that was
So,
what year?
That was September 20th, 1992. And I moved in with him in January, and we were together almost 25 years. So, and we got married on our 22nd anniversary.
So how would you describe Jerry?
We have had so much fun talking about the Jerryisms. Jerry and I picked at each other without mercy. We did all sorts of we practiced a lot of friendly insults and stuff like that. Jerry had never been an activist, and he knew everybody in town, but he had never been involved with any of the organizations. And when I went to get involved with the organizations, he knew who to contact on every one of them, and he had all of the resources. He just had never done it. So actually, I drug him around with my interest in being involved, and so and the more involved he got, the more he wanted to be involved, and he was always trying to come up with a better scheme to have potluck dinners and social events and stuff like. He was much more social than political, and I was more political than social. So he was known as the crock pot queen. Uh, Anything he cooked was in a crock pot. And after he died, I noticed I had 9 crock pots. And he, somebody right after, in fact, the couple that took me to the bar with them, and where I met Jerry, after he died, they picked up a crock pot and filled it with flowers and put it on his grave. And it got on Facebook, and everybody was commenting about how appropriate it was to have a crock pot sitting on his grave. And so since then, even though we've gone through several different crock pots, I've keep a crock pot of flowers out there. I had to pick it up last couple of weeks ago because it's cleanup time at the cemetery, and they throw everything away if I don't pick it up. So I picked it up, and a friend of mine just brought it back to me today. She took it home with her and cleaned it up and freshened the flowers up in it and everything. So next weekend I'll take it back out there again. So he we all had a lot of fun with him over he was we were coming back from a vacation in Tennessee, and we had just eaten a meal in Paducah, Kentucky, and crossed the border into Illinois and got on I-57. And there was a sign that said, exit here, road closed ahead. And I looked at him, and I was pulling a camping trailer, and I says, reckon we better exit? And he says, they're not going to close down an interstate highway with all these trucks on it. And so we went on by the exit. And then later we came to another exit, and sign said, exit here, road closed ahead. And I looked at him, and no, they're not going to close the interstate highway with this. All these trucks are on it. And then we went over a hill and saw 40 miles of backed up cars and trucks. And we sat there in the heat, in the sun. We had 2 dogs in the car, and then the air conditioner caused it to overheat because we wasn't rolling. And we had to roll the windows down and sit there and wait and wait. Finally, we got off interstate at Johnston, Illinois, I believe it is, or something, Johnston City, I believe it is. And we took back roads through and wound up, we were on our way home. We thought we'd be home that night, and we wound up camping the night at a state park there, and then came home the next day. But that's from then on. Every time he said, "I never make mistakes," I said, "No," and they don't close interstate highways when there's trucks on them either. And so he never lived that down. But he was a lot of fun for me. I enjoyed being around him. He would pick at me, I'd pick at him, and we just had a good time.
So, what do you think you learned from him?
I learned that, well, I learned you don't change people. You don't make the person into who you want them to be. You learn to love the person you love as they are. Right after we got together, he was mad at his grandparents for something. I don't remember what. They wasn't doing something the way he thought they should. And he just wasn't going to talk to them anymore. And I told him, I said, they're 80 years old. They're old people. You're not going to change them. You love them. You just love them the way they are. And from then on, I was eating those words, because every time I turned around, I was had, you know, to love him the way he was. And that's how love works. You don't make the person into the person you want them to be. You love the person they are. And I had, in an attempt to teach him a lesson, I wound up teaching myself one.
So, how do you are there memories that you carry with you in particular that you cling to on moments that you miss them every day, but are there particular times when you miss them most, and there are particular memories that really give you the most comfort?
I'm sitting here right next to my back door, and I've got a storm door that hates people. I've got so many cuts and bruises and stuff on me, where trying to get in through it, and it reaches out and bites you. It hates people. And usually he would unlock the door while I was holding the storm door open, because it was just so vicious. And every time I come home and I have to get myself in through that storm door and unlock the key lock, and that's when, yes, I miss him. Um, he he always wanted me to go to the grocery store with him. I never understood why, except he had a coupon that said we got $5 off if he bought $50 worth. So he wanted to buy $51.50 worth and get out of there. And so I would carry the calculator and he would buy the groceries. Well, I don't buy groceries the way he did. And but when I get home and have to make 6 trips to the car to bring stuff in, heck, I miss him. And but I miss having him here to talk to. And even if we talked about nothing in particular, it was somebody to talk to. I've got this wonderful back porch that looks out. I'm a block off of a major thoroughfare. And so we can sit on the back porch and look out across the street at the street activity that's going on. Bus stop and a little store over there, and the service station was there. It's closed now, but anyway, there's always stuff, and we'd sit out on the back porch. Sometimes I remember several times that we would wake up in the middle of the night and go out and sit out on the porch until we got sleepy again and go back to bed. And we were sitting out there one morning about 4 o'clock when some kind of drug deal went bad, and wound up being some people injured in what was not an accident. And we wound up talking to the police about it all, because we saw most of what happened. Although the main part of what happened was there was a bush between us and the event, so we were speculating partially, but we had a lot of information on it, and so we wound up being involved in that as far as giving information to the police.
So, and knowing that you're facing this health challenge, and then also you continuing to miss Jerry, how have you found a way to how are you finding ways to cope with all of that?
I'm the only thing I'm really coping with is the various symptoms that I'm facing. If Jerry were here, he would probably be absolutely insisting that I go through all sorts of nightmarish treatments and efforts to continue living, and I've made the decision not to do that. And I don't think his presence or lack thereof is influencing that a great deal, other than the fact that he would be probably opposing me in the decisions I've made. But I have 3 conditions that are potentially terminal, and one of them can readily and easily be fixed, and one of them can be, they think maybe could be fixed, but it would take years of treatment, and then the follow-up after the treatment would be just as bad as the treatment. And the third one is the COPD. There's nothing they can do about that. And I think, why am I going to go through all of this misery and still be alone and still be old and still be miserable after going through the misery? Why not just? And so what I've decided to do is not have any treatment at all. And I've entered into a hospice program. And the purpose is keep the rest of my life comfortable and do the things I can do and not worry about the rest. So.
And I guess to go back to your training, mortuary training, and how is that helping you? How has that kind of helped you through these moments too?
I think I have a different attitude about death than most people. I don't understand. I've always had problems with the people who love Jesus will go to extraordinarily terrible efforts to avoid meeting him. If you love him so much, run toward him, And that has never made any sense to me. I have no concern about dying. I'm comfortable with dying. That's just a part of creation. And I firmly believe in an afterlife, and I'm satisfied that I'm in good shape for that. The only problem, I absolutely love funeral service, and I love the concept of the traditional funeral. And during this COVID time, it concerns me that I might not be able to have the funeral that I would like to have. And that's just reality. There's nothing I can do about it. So not something to worry about.
Well, I found it's interesting. You talk, obviously being a Christian who is embraces the faith tradition fully. How did that having come out and living in a world that where the church hasn't been as nice to gay people as it should?
That's true.
How did you bring yourself to seek out a church? So, like you said, you found Cathedral Hope, and then, or was it
Right.
Cathedral of Hope then, and then came.
Well, it became
Decatur.
Cathedral of Hope after my involvement, actually. But I was raised in Southern Baptist Church, and my Southern Baptist training had me believing that I could not be gay. There was no way I could be gay. It was absolutely forbidden, and I resisted my sexuality for many years based on my Southern Baptist beliefs. And it was only after I finally came to terms with my sexuality and reading Loving Someone Gay, a book that came out in the late 60s, early 70s, and Troy Perry's "The Lord is my shepherd and he knows I'm gay" were the things that led me to the belief that I had spent many years praying for God to change me. And I finally reached the conclusion, either I have to believe God can't change me, or I have to believe that God can change me and doesn't want to. And I finally decided that God created me the way I was supposed to be, and God would not condemn me for being what he created me to be. And that led me on a journey from one church to another until I found the right combination and have in fact, I have a very good relationship with probably 6 to 8 churches here in Springfield. That we have 2 Jewish temples that are very affirming. We have I'm currently involved with the Unitarian Universalist Church, and but MCC, I have a lot of friends at MCC. I have a lot of friends at the Church of the Brethren. There's just a wealth of, I had a really nice conversation a couple of years ago with the pastor of the local United Church of Christ and his attitude toward the gay community. And I, after the March on Springfield, well, before the March on Springfield, we tried to identify churches where we could send speakers the Sunday before the March on Tuesday. And 2013. And I called around a bunch of churches trying to schedule someone to speak very briefly on a Sunday morning about getting people involved in that. And of the churches that are traditionally Black, I could find 0 that would let us send a speaker in. None whatsoever. I even talked to a minister who told me, he says, Buff, I could let you bring someone in and speak, and before the person was finished speaking, the committee would be planning my firing. He says, I can't do that. And I talked to several people afterwards about how sad it is that a person of color who wants to worship in a traditionally Black church can't unless they hide their sexuality. And a local minister named Reverend Wes McNeese talked to me at length and told me that it was an issue he was struggling with as well. And he wound up leaving his church. I won't say that I probably contributed a little bit to his decision, but I wasn't the main reason. But he eventually left his church and has set up a new church because he couldn't get his church to agree to the need to be open and affirming for the LGBT community. And so,
was this a UCC church or another denomination?
It was the Anderson, Indiana. It's sort of a Pentecostal movement out of Anderson, Indiana, and Anderson, Indiana is part of the name of the denomination that he left. And what he's setting up is a non-denominational, non-traditional, inclusive group that I know several of the Baha'i people are attending, and he's meeting on a Thursday night at Presbyterian Church. And wonderful man, extremely good speaker, a beautiful person, and uh, he would probably make an excellent person for you to interview someday.
Okay. Well, thank you. So for those kids, young people, young adults, even and some adults that are still um, scared to walk through a church, even though there are churches that are making strides towards being more welcoming.
Mhm.
Um, what would you say to them if they were
If,
questioning but want to go to church but are still concerned?
um, before I go to a new doctor, I call and ask if the doctor is willing to see a gay man. If he's not, I'll go somewhere else. And I see, when I moved to Decatur, I made a phone call to the Unitarian Church there because I knew there wasn't an MCC. And I called and says, I've just moved to Decatur, and most places the Unitarian Church is open to gay people, and I just want to make sure that you are before I come there. And they assured me they were, and I started going there. Uh, I did talk to one boy that was raised Catholic, and he said that he hated the church because of all the things the church had done to him. I said, there's other churches. Oh, no, there's not another church. There's only that church. And no, there's lots of churches out there. And I would say if the church can be 99% wrong, they're 1% right. And there's something good to be said about every church. And there's probably enough. You could probably come up with something against any church, but you can shop around. There's bargains out there.
Okay. So I guess my last question, when you uh, reflect on yourself as an 11-year-old or younger, and then reflect on your life now, what is it? What kind of feelings does that bring up for you to see kind of your
Oh,
journey so far?
what a roller coaster. um, no, I'm nowhere near the little boy my parents raised. I'm very different. Um, I remember one time my mother asked me what I wanted for Christmas. I was an adult by then, and I had heard about Reverend Malcolm Boyd wrote a book of prayers called "Are You Running with Me, Jesus?" And I had heard him on a talk show, and I wanted the book. And I told my mother I wanted that book, and she bought it for me, and she read it. And oh, she was very unhappy about that book. But one of the prayers was, uh, "Is Jesus with me in a gay bar?" And uh, and my mother just thought it was terrible that I would even be willing to read a prayer written by someone who had that kind of attitude. And so she died before I came out. So I didn't ever face that with her, and certainly not my father either. And I don't think it would have been a pretty sight if I had. So, but I'm I was in a conversation about taking down some statues of slave owners and stuff, and I was sort of uh, saying, I'm a very different person than I was 40 or 50 years ago, and I sure hope people don't judge me by who I was then. Look at who I am now. And we were talking about George Washington owned slaves. Well, yeah, most aristocrats of that era did. And would he, if he were alive today, would he want to own? That's a bit different question. And so I look back at my life and I see a lot of things that I wish had not happened. And they did, and I don't, I can't do anything about that. I hope I'm portraying a better person today than I was then.
Well, I can attest from my standpoint you are, and I thank you for taking the time to talk to me. And I, as soon as I get everything sewn together, I'll definitely send you the video and let you know when it's going to be at.
Okay, that'd be great.
Thank you so much. You have a great day.
Okay, you also. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Reverend Jason Carson Wilson. Welcome to Politically Pastoral Conversations. These 1-hour Zoom chats will explore the intersections of faith, politics, and society with a flair. Through conversations with people from all walks of life. Be sure to look out for our sibling production, the Politically Pastoral Podcast. Our inaugural conversation features Illinois LGBTQ+ activist and publisher, Buff Carmichael. Carmichael shares snapshots of his life, including growing up in Texas, as well as finding love and creating change in Illinois. Thanks for joining us on this transformational journey. Now let's meet Buff.